we knew that we didn't have any other members who said he could make it, so I'm glad that you came, Lisa.
Oh, happy to help. So is this CPC meeting or is this Concom meeting?
This is open space.
Open space. Oh, look at that.
And yep, I see that we are now live, so I will introduce the meeting. Good evening. This is the January 29th meeting of the Open Space Committee. This open meeting of the Open Space Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law March 29, 2023. All members of the Open Space Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Open Space Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded to the public so they can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda, unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of the meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond to let me know you're here. Dan Clark.
Here.
Paul Tagliaferra.
Here.
Brian Belfer.
Here.
Lisa Maselli.
Here.
John Campbell, I am here. We have 5 members. That is a quorum. Also welcome Vinnie Vignali of town staff. Vinnie?
Yes, here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting. And welcome Lisa as our select board representative. Your first time meeting with us.
Yes,
Thanks
yes.
for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so we have, well, some of us have limited time tonight, so we're going to try to get our business wrapped up within an hour or less. Our first item is the consideration of minutes from December 20. We had a meeting on a Wednesday night, and I'd like to know if anybody has any comments or amendments to the minutes, and otherwise a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Brian. Motion by Brian, approved by Dan. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a roll call vote for approval of the minutes. Dan Clark.
Yes, I didn't second it, actually. It wasn't me.
Yep. I seconded Paul.
I'm sorry, Paul.
I vote
Anyway,
yes.
Dan Clark votes yes.
Yep.
Paul T.
Yes,
Were you at the meeting? Okay.
I was. Yeah.
Brian,
Yes.
John, yes, and Lisa, you weren't there, so
Nope, I'll abstain.
very good. 4-0 approved on the minutes. Thank you very much. Got that out of the way. Okay, so our major piece of business tonight is discussing the potential town acquisition of 432 Whitney Street property. And to bring everybody up to speed, the select board met last, what day was that? Was that a Monday? Was that
It's always a
Yeah.
Monday.
last Monday? And ultimately approved for the town to move forward with the purchase. There was quite a bit of discussion that night, very good citizen input. For the most part, I heard support, although a few questions about exactly how to go about it. Since that time, a CPA application has been formally submitted by the town planning department through Lori Connors. That's been noted and received by the Community Preservation Committee, at least via email. The CPC meets on Thursday at 7. That meeting is in person, either at the Select Board Room or Conference Room B, by the way. And they will be considering the application, which, although it came late in the CPC cycle, they will discuss it. Where it comes into play with the Open Space Committee is what sources of funds will be used. And this has been discussed a bit with our Community Preservation Coalition contacts Stuart Saganor. He's the executive director and often guides local CPCs on how to go about formatting warrant articles and how to approach different projects. He's given some guidance on this one in particular for several reasons. Number one, simply put, if we're buying property with CPA money, the property value needs to be verified, and the CPA amount purchased must not exceed its value. So to do so, we have to get an independent assessment, and that may take time. I'm not certain as we sit if we're going to pursue that prior to potentially bringing this to town meeting if the CPC were to agree. There's another mechanism by which the CPA funds could be used, and that would be to borrow against future CPA revenue. And by doing so, you commit that you're buying the land for open space preservation purposes and or for other purposes, but you don't actually have to make the determination of the value and the portion of the land that is to be conserved until you go to vote to spend the money against the bond. Simply put, that might be the next town meeting a year from now. So there's some benefits to that, given that the proposal in the application is that a small portion of the land be kept aside for the potential to build affordable housing. A small development of 4 to 8 units is what is stated in the application. I can't imagine that would be more than 2 or 3 acres, probably the land closer to the road. But the remaining acres and linkage to the other conservation areas that was a benefit for us recommending it could still be maintained. But again, that hasn't been worked out. In the CPA funds currently, we have the conservation fund monies that were placed there by open space committee applications that were approved at town meeting. And there's currently $664,000 in the conservation fund for the purpose of open space acquisition and conservation. We also have over 1 million, about 1,060,000 of unreserved funds in CPA. Those funds can be used for any of the core areas of CPA and have yet to be designated toward it. We submitted an application to the CPC earlier, and CPC approved to bring it to town meeting. That application asked for 350,000 additional funds to be placed to the conservation fund. To approve it, the CPC authorized it or recommended using roughly 130,000 of the unreserved funds and the remainder to come from new revenue. The other new revenue that was available was committed to other projects by the CPC at its January 4th meeting. So what I'm getting at is there may be a discussion at the CPC about which group of funds is used, and there might be a discussion that regards whether the Open Space Committee, whether that application could be either modified or contributed toward this application instead. For instance, what if the CPC wanted to utilize all of the conservation fund monies that are CPA authorized, the 664, and then also use unreserved fund revenues that technically could cover the cost of this acquisition. In the end, if that happened, there'd be around 200,000 left over, and that would probably remain in the unreserved fund to be considered in a future year. And we could, in a future year, look to restore more to the conservation fund. That's one approach. Another approach that the CPC may discuss is leaving the conservation funds as they are until the portion of the land that would be open space versus a possible affordable housing portion is determined and the value is assessed on the open space land. that might take more time than we have before town meeting. We could use a portion of the unreserved funds and some borrowing to bring that to town meeting that way. So it's a little complicated. Don't really have a clear consensus on what makes sense for the town. I think there'll be some input from town staff, maybe the town finance director, about what approach would be easiest to go to town meeting with, given the short time frame. So I just sort of wanted to update everybody on what had been discussed around that potential. And then I wanted to open it to members about, comments on what I just said, feelings about the conservation fund. Dan, you represent the Concom, which ultimately would have to sign off on using the funds for this as well. So I wanted to open up at this point for any comments or questions on what I presented so far.
Here's my hand.
Lisa, if you want to speak, it's a very informal meeting, so
Is it?
just
Okay.
jump right in.
I was looking like, where's
they would
my
kind of
little
wave.
hand
You know,
up
you
here,
can-
right?
You can just sort of blurt out.
Okay. I of course am in support of doing this. I think the piece of land that we're looking at is, it's good conservation land for the the views that Laura talked about in the hill and its connection to some of the other areas. It's a shame we have to go about doing what we're doing, but is the unreserved fund been collecting a lot of money in the past few years and hasn't been used, or can we replenish that in a short amount of time if it is used up?
Well, what happens is that any new revenue that is uncommitted to a project will go into the unreserved fund automatically.
Mhm.
And also in a given year, and several times in the last few years, the state legislature has approved a bonus round of income.
Mm.
And usually that happens either during or after the CPC committee cycle. So those extra funds have come into the town, but just put in the unreserved fund. And then specifically the last couple of years, 2 years ago, there was a major application to add affordable housing at the Village Drive complex. Round numbers, it was going to be about $800,000.
Mhm.
And CPC approved bringing that to town meeting, but in the period from the CPC's hearing to prior to town meeting, the state support for the project from the Housing Authority was rescinded for some reason. After telling them that they had all their ducks in a row, then they told them they didn't. So in the end, the project failed. And as a result, we had that amount that had been uncommitted to a project. So that was a big reason why the balance grew in the unreserved fund.
Okay.
Last year in the CPC, there was a consensus to be a little conservative in the projects that were approved. We did not have that many large projects anyway, and we passed on a couple so that the unreserved fund, the savings account, if you will, could be as large as possible, because we anticipated the possibility that an application would come forth regarding White Cliffs.
Mm.
And of course, there was a project for White Cliffs that would have required CPA money, but that fell through as well, as you know. So here we are in this current cycle, and we have this larger than normal balance in the unreserved fund. The other columns of CPA, in the historical reserve, there is 0. In the open space reserve, there is 0. But in fact, we've been putting open space requests into the conservation fund, and the town has voted to approve that each time. So we actually do have open space reserves in the conservation fund. In the affordable housing reserve, there's about 280,000 that was put there by a couple of prior town meetings. And the affordable housing advocates, specifically the NAHC, have asked that that be maintained there for the potential projects that they are working on the short term, such as another property at Boundary Street, and so on. So that's where we are for some CPC information.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, especially the 800,000. So say we were to use all of this now, for this project, how long would it take to bring the amount back? Couple of years? I mean, is there enough with the tax dollars that's collected and what the state gives us, or would it
Well,
take?
yeah, I mean, the fortunate thing is that we are bringing in, if this year's expected revenue, basically FY25's expected CPA revenue to the town is over $800,000. I expect that it probably won't go down. This is a percentage of property values in the town,
Mhm.
and it's generally gone slightly up each year. And then the state match, that's a wild card because it's gone up and down. There's been some bonus round matches, but it's not expected to get a bonus match this year. And the state match is on the lower side, I think around 25%. But nonetheless, every time the state match comes in, that money gets added. And in essence, it goes into the unreserved fund until the next cycle of CPC, when they consider whether it's needed for a project or not. So in round numbers, by a year from now, there'll be probably another $1 million of CPA revenue available for saving or projects, with the exception that we know that we'll have another bond payment on the White Cliffs purchase. We're in like the last 3 of that.
Okay.
But other than that, you'll have the minimum obligations of 10% through affordable housing, open space, and historic. And even if there was no project asking for them, those amounts would be put into their respective fund balances, not left in the unreserved fund balance.
Okay.
But I say it's fortunate because to me, and having worked with the CPC for its entire history of Northborough, I see that we're getting consistent revenue, and it really gives the town a lot of options. So although we know that there'll be other needs coming, and White Cliffs being one of them someday,
Mhm.
we have resources coming in each year, and we always have the mechanism within the legislature of CPA to borrow against future revenue. So that gives us a window for something else big that might come along.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, I think when people are looking at, spending the money for the product, that knowing that it's not going to be, a devastation down the road helps to maybe align some more people that feel this is a worthwhile expense.
Yeah, I agree.
So-
And it'll be important. Should it come to town meeting, it would be important to note again that this is the CPA tax surcharge revenue, does not affect the town's budget in any other way, does not raise your taxes in any other way.
Mhm.
And we're using the reserves, or we're using the resource that we really already have there. And it's a good reason to use it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Couple thoughts, John. So I think, one of the main reasons we kept building up this conservation fund was to be prepared for when something came along. And certainly hard to predict what there may be for future land acquisition opportunities, but we know this one is a reality. It's right here in front of us. So I think we sort of commit to what we've been saving up for and put in either all or a significant amount of our conservation fund for this project. And hopefully in the future, the CPC would, look favorably on our future request to try and build that fund back up. But I think this is sort of the reason why we have the money. Good acquisition opportunity comes up and we can contribute what we can to it.
Thank you. I agree with you. And in just speaking personally, there's something to be said for using the conservation fund, as you just said, which we've been saving up into, and then figuring out the remainder of the purchase from, be it CPC's unreserved funds or some other mechanism. But you know, it's sort of like town meeting has voted to put that in there, and now we're utilizing it, which is exactly the strategy that
Yep.
we asked the town to vote for.
Right.
So I need, we all need a little more information, and the CPC in particular, about if we do that. Well, the one thing I know, again, from discussion with the coalition, the Community Preservation Coalition, is that should we want to use those funds, then we need to find a way to map and do an assessment on at least a portion of the property that would match that value. So we have to figure out a way to get that done before this town meeting. And really, we only have a little bit of time after that. I think an extension was granted on the time window for the town to commit to buy it, which goes past town meeting, so that's good. But I think we're all assuming this will come to town meeting in some form.
And don't we have to also put a restriction on the land once it's purchased?
Yes. In fact, any real property, which is usually land or building, that's acquired with CPA needs to have a permanent restriction. And so in past years, Lisa, because you're new to this committee, any other properties we've purchased, we've found a partner for a formal conservation restriction. Sudbury Valley Trustees has been that partner in the past. Other organizations have been that partner, because the town doesn't want to hold that restriction as far as being the quote unquote overseer of it. But you know, we've been able to do that. So all of our CPA acquired properties have some permanent restriction on them.
And is there an extra cost to that as well?
There is typically some documentation, legal stuff that we have used the CPA administration fund for, because it is an approved use, a proper use of the administrative fund, since it speaks directly to the business of the committee and the execution of a project that was using CPA.
Okay.
To loop back and touch to what Dan was saying, I mean, it does seem like this is the reason we've been, you know, saving all of this money. And I think if we're looking at, you know, the other potential purchases that might come up, there's nothing even on our long list for like outreach and whatnot. I don't think there's anything super viable right now. And even the ones on that list that look enticing probably could be pushed a year. I don't see that we're competing with anything else sort of on our immediate list.
Oh, you're right. And one thing that just popped into my mind when you were saying that is, should this go through, the town sees another example that the Open Space Committee and the town are active in acquiring and preserving open space. So any property owner out there can be reassured once again that, you know,
we're for real.
Yeah, we do these things. I mean, the last one of any magnitude was the Shunderland that we now call the Green Street Meadow, or whatever its name is. But many of the others have been somewhat smaller, but nonetheless, we have consistency with this. So I agree with you.
I think that's usually the drawback, and that's what we heard a little bit at the meeting on Monday night. The few people that felt it was, spending tax dollars and not understanding that no, there's different benefits that we can tap to be able to make this happen without hurting the tax roll.
Yeah, I almost spoke up. I was on that call and then I was
Oh.
waiting. My hand was raised and then John
Mhm.
spoke up. But I actually had sort of wanted to respond to one of the other citizens on that call that it's actually a good thing that the town is doing stuff. Like sitting on all of our money and never doing anything is not particularly progressive. And someone was pointing out that we have all these all these high dollar projects lined up. And I actually think that that's a reasonably positive thing that we're actually moving forward with things.
Yeah, I agree.
Not
Yeah,
that it would
we-
bankrupt us, but it's nice to see things actually happen.
Yeah.
And I hope hope I wasn't overly verbose calling into that meeting, but the point was that the benefit to the CPA in Northborough is really that we have this extra pot of money, extra resource. We can't use CPA for everything. We're not going to be able to use CPA for all the plans we might have for downtown revitalization or for renovating a building for town hall and so on and so forth. So where we do have a purpose to use it for, just as you say, Brian, let's put it to use.
So do you need to do a vote tonight, or are you just talking about it?
Well, let me get back to maybe we should vote, but the question would be, should the discussion come up before the CPC about either amending the application already approved? Somewhere we need to come up with a larger pot of money than the conservation fund has. The CPC approved adding $350,000 more to that. Some of it needed to, because of the math, some came from new revenue, some came from the unreserved fund. And so it's really just moving the numbers around. But if the discussion is something like, rather than the CPA application, the open space application, excuse me, for 350 more to the conservation fund, would the open space committee agree? Instead, we'll amend our resources toward this new application to purchase 432 Whitney Street. Once again, it's just a matter of moving the dollars to and from. I think if the conservation fund monies are used this year, rather than the other mechanism I was mentioning, and the reason we would do that only is for the time flexibility to go through the valuing and assessments, I think. But if the discussion came up around amending or rescinding our first application in favor of using the resources for the second one, do members have any problem with that or any input? So I put that to all of you right now.
Sounds fine to me.
Yeah, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't amend that.
I agree with you, since I'm a new person here today, but I have been watching a little bit for what's going on, so I'd be in favor of that.
Fair enough.
Same here.
Good, thank you, Paul. I'm hearing consensus. I don't really think we need to vote, but that will allow, since I represent open space on the CPC, that will allow me to speak positively to that. And we'll see, hopefully get a little more information, and maybe we'll have either some guidance from town staff or members of town staff present on Thursday night, and we can sort of figure out how we were to put the funds together, what the best approach is, and then make that into the potential approval of the application. Because right now the application does not state where the money comes from, only that it looks for CPA to cover the entire amount. And by the way, the Open Space Committee is listed as the sponsor of it, which I don't think we have any problem with.
Yeah, when I talked to excuse me, John, when I talked to Laurie, she said that she needs a letter to include in the package. So if we can get a vote tonight and I'll, that you, the Open Space Committee, wants to sponsor this item for the acquisition of 432 Whitney.
So fair enough. Well, so that makes sense. And I will just note that I sent around to everybody what I think was the updated document. It's dated January 24. It's the official application that she put in. But the application does in fact state that it's for open space and for housing. And Lori's application describes that the goal would be to carve out a small portion for a small scale affordable housing development. Again, this does not have a lot of definition other than that scope. But it allows us to use CPA for both. And at some point, then the portion that goes to housing would be broken off, and that would be noted, and then the remainder would be open space. So I support that. I think we need to do more for affordable housing in the town, and carving out an area where we know that something could be developed. It might be years from now, but at least it would be designated for that. But I just wanted members to be sure that that's in the application. Is there any comment on that? Any discussion to work on?
I'd like to ask, and Vinny might know the answer to this too, in that land has been difficult to develop because of the wetlands and because of the road. I think Vinny was telling me that just trying to get a vehicle down to build the original request for a warehouse down there would be difficult to get the equipment and to build it. So that if that were the case and they weren't actually able to build because of the constraints down there, how would that change the application?
Yeah, the idea there is that the warehouse and the farm building that was proposed was in the southern end of the lot, with the frontage is on the northern end. And there is some fill that is up at Whitney Street in that area that's naturally higher than the wetlands. So the environmental restrictions are mostly in the middle of the lot. And they were proposing to go and build a road back and down through to the southern buildable portion, which is the bigger portion of the lot for development. But if we're discussing a small residential development, it could be, I think it would be able to be squeezed into the area that's right up near Whitney Street, so that you wouldn't have to deal with the restrictions. You'd still have to file with the Conservation Commission, but you wouldn't have all the restrictions of wetland fillings that would be appropriate or would be associated with a significant access road going out into the back.
Okay, so it's pretty much you'd maybe access it off of Whitney?
Oh, yes, it would definitely, the only access is off of Whitney, and it would be close to Whitney as opposed to accessing off Whitney and going 1,000 feet to the back of the lot. And that's what was originally proposed. So that 1,000-foot stretch was where the problem was, around 400 feet back. So if they do the work in the front part of the lot, they should be able to get some housing in there, maybe oversize the parking lot to have the parking for any trailhead that the Trails Committee would want to use. And then have the trails lead out of the affordable housing parking area.
Okay. It's good to let people know there's a lot of options down there too.
Paul?
So John, I guess just a question, like how does that process work then? Is that like, we're saying that we will sell it to a private developer to develop the multifamily unit? And that's sort of part of the agreement there? Just from like a high level, like is the process we put in our application that we will try to have a small multifamily in the front portion of the property? Like how does that process play out?
I think at this point, the process only is to state that housing is a category in the application as well as open space. And again, with limited time, there's not a designation as to what portion of the land that is. So it's a little tricky. I'm not sure if the town is going to attempt to do so before town meeting. But the application does not infer who would develop it, only that by acquiring part of the land with CPA money, it would be designated for that use until such time as, you know, you could make a decision to take it away from that use, and you'd have to basically pay back the CPA, you know, the CPC. But right now, the application only would designate that it's going to be used for that use. Then the presumed partners, should there be a building project proposed, would be the Northborough Affordable Housing Corporation and possibly Habitat for Humanity or the Housing Authority in combination with those organizations, much like we've done with the limited projects already produced in town, you know, and much like the Housing Authority has proposed before. So as far as who would develop it after that, you know, which people would actually do the building, that would be managed by those groups.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think it's you know, when it moves forward, if it moves forward in this way and it comes to town meeting, I think, and I think Lori knows that we need to have a little more description of what it might be, just to make sure that there's no misunderstanding that the town, let's just say hypothetically, someone thinks, well, what are you going to do down the road? Are you going to decide to just build out all this big development of housing? And we'd be able to say, no, there's the vast majority, you know, 21 out of 23 acres is to be permanently conserved and is permanently conserved. So this would only be a small building. And, you know, we'll have to be able to answer those questions if they came up hypothetically, if you understand me.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, definitely.
So, John, I guess, I don't know if it's possible. I would feel more comfortable if the application or at somewhere it's stated that the potential development would be constrained to that area right along Whitney Street. I guess my concern is that if you commit to affordable housing and somehow that portion of the lot's unbuildable, now all of a sudden you see the affordable housing moving south into that conservation area, and then essentially you've lost the value of the conservation area at that point. So if it's contained to abutting Whitney Street, I don't have a problem with it. But if the language is so loose that it could end up anywhere, I guess I would have an issue with that.
No, I tend to concur with you. I think that we need, and I think this discussion will play out at the CPC meeting too. I think there needs to be some definition, and it just might mean enough time to assess the property. And at the time of this meeting, I don't have all the answers. I don't think Vinnie does either. I think that Lori Connors is aware that we probably need to work on that part of it, because I share your concern, and I think that should be the position of this committee.
You're right.
Maybe we could craft language like that in our letter.
I mean, I would think I would want to read something like, you know, we're in support of, you know, reserving approximately 4 acres somewhere within the, you know, the northern corner of the parcel for affordable housing as feasible.
So long as it doesn't impact the conservation value and the connectivity value of the property.
Right. I think 4 acres might be big. I would
That was pulling that out of the sky. I'm not actually sure how much acreage affordable housing would want as like a minimum size.
Yeah.
Right. I think Laurie would probably go through and look at the zoning and see what we need. I think we'd probably be okay with 2, but the idea of having some number, that sounds fine. I can talk to her tomorrow, and I can draft something tomorrow and send it to the either the whole board or the whole committee or or just the chair for the support letter for sponsorship, because that's really all we're at now. We're not designing it, or we're not doing the survey or the appraisals that are going to be required. We're just at the first step, and that's just getting it up so that it's being considered for acquisition.
Why don't we say that as that what we need to vote on is agreement on a letter of support that would support the application as written, but that provided that the portion that is assigned to affordable housing would be near the road and small enough so as not to impact the conservation value and the connectivity opportunity to other lands. That was part of the benefit for agreeing to the purchase in the first place.
And maybe putting a two acre limit. Nothing greater than.
Yeah, I don't know about putting a number on it right at this moment, because I just don't know what that number should be. Maybe 1 acre is enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so
Right.
too.
But
Okay.
maybe you can work around that particular part of it, but expressing the concern for maintaining the conservation value.
So moved. Was that your, is that?
Want me to second that?
Exactly what I was hoping to hear.
Yeah.
So moved by Dan,
I second it.
second by Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah.
And any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote for support of the letter, or for the letter of support. Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
and John. We are approved, and we'll leave it to Vinny to draft it. Are you okay with that, Vinny?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Vinny, if there's any opportunity to wander around that parcel, I'd love to get on that expedition team.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, he's been pretty good. The owner's been really good about giving me access to go out there. So it's an interesting parcel. I think you'll appreciate it. And there's a lot of hiking and trails opportunities.
One other note to mention, part of what Lori is bringing to the CPC is a request for administrative funds for soil testing. And I assume the scope of that is to make sure there's no contaminants. Scott Charpentier, the DPW director, is coordinating that and has brought forth the quote for those services. But I don't know if part of that is to do a general overview of where you might build on it. And then what I want to ask Lori as soon as possible is whether he and town staff and you, Vinny, believe we could attempt to get an assessment done, which would be required if we move forward with what this committee thought we would do. Use the conservation fund money, even if even if the proportion of acreage is not fully defined, at least carving out what we think it would be, and then trying to do an assessment between the two parcels. And I don't know how exactly that would get done. Assessors work on giving you the highest and best use of a particular piece of land, but I'm not sure, how it would get done. So we need to be talking with a professional to see what they think about approaching it that way.
Is there
Yeah, that's-
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, that sounds like what Laurie was talking about, getting an appraisal and then having a survey. Once we figure out once the town decides how they want to move forward, then you would survey out the document or survey out the property so that you can divide it up And that would then go to the planning board for the approval through the A&R process and conservation if there's a site plan that requires work within 100 feet of the wetlands. So, and also, I don't know if there's a sewer out there, whether those are out on septic, but I think it's septic because of the railroad tracks and the soil testing that would be done for the 21E assessment might be easily expanded to do a couple of perk and deep holes for a soil septic assessment. But if Scott's paying attention to that, he knows what he's doing. We should be all set with getting the work done that's needed.
I think the part that relates to this committee is whether we can get an assessment for that portion that we know is going to be preserved for open space. And we don't need any zoning changes to do that because we will have bought it and designated it for that purpose, just like any other properties that we've done. But the rest of it gets a little complicated.
Well, especially if there's like 2005, I guess there was a lot of fill brought in that caused some problems. So they're gonna have to, I don't know where on the site it was brought in, but that's probably one of the reasons for the soil testing, even before you can offer the, finish the PNS, which I would have put it in with the PNS as part of the PNS, but I don't know if that's how they're gonna handle it.
Well, I remember hearing the town council on the select board meeting commenting that, should it get to that step, then the PNS would be edited to suit the town of Northborough.
Mm. Yeah, as it should be anyway. So there are some interesting things there. I mean, it's again, I think it's a great opportunity for open space and the trails and all the things that Vinny has seen when he's been out there.
Very good. So in respect to Brian's time, I know we're starting to run short and you had another meeting starting. I wanted to recommend, we can't, I don't think we make decisions on the outreach mailings. I'd like to have some other members present. And, we have no particular urgency. This is obviously the most urgent thing, but I'd like to get into that at the next meeting. And if there's a need to meet sooner because of something with this property, we could call another meeting. Otherwise, we had agreed to do an every other month cycle. And that would put us at the end of March 25. Does that sound okay with everybody if we just make that the next meeting?
We just double check to see if I'm not at a select board meeting.
Yeah, and I know there's going to be times when that conflicts, Lisa. It's been hard for us to find other nights that don't conflict with somebody else's meeting.
Yeah, I definitely have a meeting on the 25th, so, but
Okay.
you managed to do it without me up until now, so.
Well, fair enough. We can also entertain changing up the time, for when you could attend, things like that in the future.
Would you
Anything
want to
is
have
good
that?
for me, so.
So is 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock preferred? It's up to you.
I don't know. Let's decide that down the road a bit, Vinny.
Okay. That's right. We're not continuing a hearing, so we don't have to be definitive.
No. And when we get closer to that, I mean, I don't want to assume that Lisa wants to meet at 6 with the open space committee and then meet for like 5 more hours with the select board. You won't be awake, but
What do you mean, 12 o'clock the other night?
yeah, I know that really
Punch
went
you
on.
by the end of that.
It's hard. Anyway, but we'll feel that out as we get closer to that.
Okay.
So we'll go with that as our proposed next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. Very good. Kind of all I had. Does anybody else have anything else to bring up?
John, I was just going to ask with the letters, which I know is not really a priority. I don't actually know what the methodology is for. I know I drafted one and I sent it to you, but I'm not actually sure like how we're supposed to disseminate those or review them. Which we don't need to answer right now. I'm lacking in knowing what the process should be as like one of us drafts one, how we review it. Like, is
Sure.
it email? Do we wait for a meeting? Like, it's just not entirely sure. So,
I will tell you that the one that you drafted and I promised to get back to you on and I procrastinated, I actually looked at it earlier tonight and I had very few edits, so I'm going to send it back to you. But I think we'll just wait for the full committee. But that letter I thought was fine and it's, you know, it's a little specific to that resident and I think it's great. And then as for the other general letters, what we did in the past was simply agree on the language. And then we sent them out by mail, not email, to the full list of property owners that we felt fit the particular category, like general or I don't know. We had a couple different categories I thought that we were doing, but the one that you did was a little more particular. So that would, let's just say that could be one of the first to go out.
excellent.
But,
I gotta
we-
check off. I have to leave. My next meeting is
Um,
starting. So,
No problem. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Quickly, all in favor to adjourn, Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes,
and me. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
thank
All right.
you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Bye now.